Well, thank you for attending the training session. This is a basic training session on Le Capitale software, the introduction to the software, the download of the software program, as well as the introduction and how to do a basic term illustration. We're going to go through everything to get you started at illustrating with Le Capitale. Just to start, if we go to the lecapitale.com website, we were to click on brokers, advisors. If we were to scroll down and say, yes, I'm a broker, it's going to take you into the site, and we can scroll further down to the download illustration software button. All that needs to be done is you click this button right here, this link. It will start the download process. You can run it from its location. When you run, it's going to ask you to key in this 6-digit code, which will then allow the software to install and be opened. When you open the Le Capitale software, what it will create on your desktop, just for simplicity, is a link that looks like this. Okay, this is the Le Capitale software. When you open the Le Capitale software and double click on that, it will bring you to a page that looks like this. It will ask you to key in your name and information the very first time you do it. Just as a reference, when you put in your name, Le Capitale asks for last name first usually, so please check that. It will say name, but it means last name. When we're in here looking at the software, you can open by clicking here to open the Life software, or you can click here. Since we're going to do a term insurance quote for starting, we're going to go under life insurance, select term. It's going to open individual or joint. You can really switch between the two once you've started an illustration, so it's quite simple. I'm going to start with an individual illustration, and it will open the software that looks like this. If you would like to change any of your information as an advisor, you can go into options, advisor ID, and here's where your information can be found. This is where you will also change your province if you represent, or if you're a rep licensed in multiple provinces. Okay? This will all appear on your software. Notice it's last name first and then first name. If you do it in the reverse, all of your quotes will have your name backwards. Once we're in, we save, we close. Now we can enter client information quite simply. By default, name means the client's last name. I know that's confusing for a lot of advisors because we like to start with people's first name. It's what we call their name. But quite simply, this is the client's last name. I'm going to leave the default client name as client. One caution, in the illustration software, it will always use uppercase letters. That sometimes frustrates some people, but it is the way the software is built. So you're using uppercase letters. First name, any first name is fine. Sex, we only have male and female, so you have to select between those two in our software. Date of birth is very simple as well. We can select the date of birth. This is sometimes challenging for people because we pick a date, April, we pick a month. Yeah, let's go back to, I don't know, 1975. And we're gonna pick a day, let's go with the 15th. It's going to select a date of birth. You saw the age change briefly. It won't, however, take effect until we close the illustration. If you have not selected a day in your calendar, it won't fully update. You must select a month, a day, and a year. All three must be chosen. The age will be selected. It is an age nearest. We're an age nearest company. So I recommend using date of birth because we don't always calculate which age is closest every time we do an illustration properly. Smoker status, Le Capitale is very simple. We offer smoker or non-smoker. A marijuana smoker is a non-smoker, but what we're asking here is any nicotine use. So that's any tobacco products, anything with nicotine. Sometimes people will have things like Pon or a mouth freshener that may contain nicotine. If there's any nicotine in their system, they're considered a smoker, regardless of the source. Even people that are still using Nicorette or on a gum or a patch will be considered a smoker during the underwriting process. Okay. Most of the time we're dealing with non-smokers, so I'm going to show that. We're going to look again briefly at extra premium. You will almost never use this component for your initial quote with a client. Where you will use this is after a case has been through underwriting. If we assess the client at a higher risk, they've been rated, you would indicate the rating here. So 100% is standard, 200% is double the risk. If your client was quoted perhaps standard for life but rated for CI due to family history, you can select that in the software here. You can rate by individual line as opposed to across the board. There could also be temporary ratings. A notable example is a cancer recovery may have a temporary rating for a period of time of 5 years or 7 years. Okay? And that would be listed here as a temporary rating and the duration of risk. Okay? As we continue along, we can add multiple clients to the same illustration. You can put as many clients as you want. I think the maximum I've ever seen is 15. And in doing so, you would just select add and add additional lines of clients. Just adding them here only makes them eligible to add coverage in the future of running the quote. You have to put in your clients first, and then you can put in what products those clients would like to have. Okay, so just for clarification. By default, when we select one client as a male, the second client will automatically be a female. It happens more frequently that we have opposite sex couples buying insurance, although you may absolutely change it depending on the circumstances. Hey, I'm going to use these two clients. I picked a 44-year-old, and the default client with Le Capitale software is always 35. As you can see, we can select just by year. You do not have to use the date of birth, but I do recommend it. Okay, I'm going to show both just for purposes of illustration. Okay, so now I have two clients set up on this illustration. It moves me down to the next line where we're dealing with the policy holder. This is who is the owner of the policy. The owner of the contract by default in our software will be the first insured. If you notice in this upper box, we've got this box labeled insured. Insured number 1 is the first client. Insured number 2 is the second client. As of right now, my selection is insured number 1, and it verifies that with Mr. Client's name. Okay. If I were to change this to be myself, you would see, whoops, delete, A-L-L-E-N. Now you can see that the last name for insured 1 has become Alan. If I wanted to change the owner to be my wife in this case, it will say that this is Mrs. Client because I made it insured 2. If I would like both of us to be owners on the intended policy because we're both going to be covered on the contract, I can select 2 policyholders and put both of our names in here so we will both be owners. If I would like to name a third party, someone other than either one of us, I could select that third party and insert their information here. And if I would like it to be a company, I can insert the company name here. So we have all of the options available. Your province of incorporation for the company we will ask as well, because that will change the structure of the contract. It comes up very infrequently. Okay. So now I've gone back to me being the owner just for simplicity. By default, I now have this tab here is coverage 1. We need multiple coverages in some cases. So what do I have here? My initial coverage is coverage for insured 1. If I don't want any coverage for insured 1, but the only reason I put the first person in was to be the policy owner, I can delete this coverage and start from scratch. Okay. When I start here, I have no coverage at all. I have no coverage on this person. I would like to do insert coverage for, or my plan for coverage 1. I want an individual product and I want term insurance. Now I've got term insurance. My insurance product is 10-year term by default because I selected term. When I come down to my main coverage, we offer 2 options of term. Almost always your client is going to want renewable and convertible fixed term. It's what we always sell. We do offer decreasing term and some clients will be interested in it. It's a very popular product in some areas of the country, not everywhere, however. My recommendation would be to stick with fixed. The default setting for insurance, most clients like 20-year term, and it's what we use for most examples. However, our clients frequently want the least expensive amount of insurance or the least expensive coverage, which typically starts as a 10-year term. If I were to look at this client as an example at an amount of say $250,000, we have $250,000 of coverage on a 10-year basis is $250, $220. As I said, most clients will typically buy a 20-year term. I have my entire screen shared, so I'm going to show you what this little I button means on the software. The I button is the term coverages comparison, and the beautiful thing about that, if we tick this button, it will open our PDF viewer. Adobe Acrobat. It'll click and buzz and think for a minute, and then it's going to open this screen. What this screen says is for this client, our 44-year-old male looking at 10-year term for $250,000 is going to be $29.37 a month. If we were to change from 10-year term to 20-year term, it's going to be an additional $11. Depending on the age of the client, the discrepancy might be very small. This is roughly a 45-year-old client. For a 35-year-old client, it might only be a $1 difference. As we get older, the discrepancy between 10 and 20-year term becomes longer. At Le Capitale, we would very much like your clients to buy longer duration term. We also have much better compensation on longer duration term. The reason both of these happen, We pay more compensation because we want your clients to select longer duration. And the reasoning behind that is it's been determined actuarially that it takes about 13 years before we make profit on term insurance. As such, we don't particularly want anyone to sell 10-year term because we will most likely lose money on those products. Okay? This is why we do this. If you started with a 20-year term case, you wouldn't see the 10-year term option. This alternative solutions page will only show an increase in the duration or an effort to upsell your client. We will never show a shorter duration term in this page. If I were to close it and select very simply, let's look at 20 years, it's going to show that total premium. If I opened the exact same screen, the 10-year row is no longer available. It'll show the default as 20 years and the additional cost to move up to 25 or the additional cost to move to 30. We're always looking to extend the duration of your client's term, not reduce the duration. Okay? So that'll give a very simple example of this. We've got a $250,000 case. I find most clients are typically looking for more than $250,000, or most advisors are typically quoting more than $250,000. Frequently, our clients are dropping down to numbers closer to that. But we can absolutely illustrate any amount. This is a very simple starting point term insurance quote on one client. I'm going to take a very simple approach and add our second client. So all we have at this point is a 20-year renewable and convertible term for $250,000 on our male client. I'm going to add a coverage for insured number 2, the spouse. Now we have coverage on the second spouse. We have 2 individual coverages. This is individual life as well, and we're looking at term insurance. Again, I'm looking at renewable and convertible fixed term. I'm probably looking at 20-year term as well, and I'm looking at $250,000 here also as an example. Okay. What we can see here is a summary. Coverage 1, which relates to tab 1, the total coverage is 20-year term for $485 a year. Coverage 2 is tab 2. The total coverage or the total cost is $170 a year. These are annual costs and they're relatively low. The reason there's such a discrepancy, even though it's the same amount of insurance, is client 2 is a female who has a longer life expectancy, and in this case, she's 8 years younger. So a younger female is obviously going to be less expensive. Okay. We've got a relatively small amount. By default, we have a monthly premium of $58.50. We've set it as a pre-authorized payment. You can switch it to cash. Cash is the most confusing term in the software, simply because we don't want your client to pay by cash. What it means is an annual payment rather than a monthly payment. Okay? So I'm going to leave it as monthly for a moment, and we're going to take a quick look at the actual output of an illustration, and then we might complicate it ever so slightly. This is a basic illustration, 2 clients, each for a 20-year term for $250,000. We'll push the illustrate button, and it's going to ask us if we want a full illustration or a partial illustration. If we select partial, we can do just the summary. We can describe all the benefits. We can describe the complementary benefits. We can show the values, which will really just be an increase, or the renewal rates, underwriting requirements most of the time we want. That alternative term coverages comparison that I illustrated by clicking the little I button in the software can also be selected by ticking this button, and it will open it as well so that you can print it if you want to for your clients. I recommend for your initial quote and when you're playing with it for yourself that you do the full illustration. And the reason is it will give a full and complete explanation of everything in the illustration, because there are features and benefits included in our term insurance, which is the primary reason that Experior recommends La Capitale for term insurance, is because of the features and benefits. You want to make sure you have not only an understanding, but the simplicity of explaining it by having it in a package for you. My recommendation, run illustrations on yourself to get familiar with the software before you ever try to do it for a client. Put together a full package on yourself. It will give you a very long illustration. The more riders we incorporate, the longer the illustration will be, because there will be a full explanation for every component. As you can see here, we call every illustration exposes. Probably is pronounced differently if I say it in French, but I'm an English-speaking person. So what you will see here is my information as indicated originally on the advisor info. We've got, here's my information, age at nearest birthday. We've got 20-year convertible and renewable term for $250,000, the premium. We are going to remind every client, every time we do an illustration, that we automatically include the total loss of autonomy benefit. For those of you viewing this for the first time and hearing about us for the first time, the key advantage in La Capitale, or one of them anyway, is that our life insurance is truly a benefit for while you're alive. The total loss of autonomy can pay a benefit of up to 50% of the face amount to a maximum of $200,000, which is listed right here, on our software, and states maximum $125,000. At the bottom, the maximum payable across all benefits. So if our client had multiple levels of benefit in the software, they would see a maximum total of $200,000. In this case, it would be $125,000. If this client had another term quote as another coverage, there would only be $75,000 of available room under the total loss of autonomy benefit. Okay, and that's explained right here. This is the subtotal for client 1, $485,000 annually. For Mrs. Client 2, we've got $250,000 as well, with a total loss of autonomy of $125,000. Again, I'll explain this slightly differently. Had we done $500,000 on one client, the maximum this number would list is $200,000. $500,000 of total coverage with a maximum 50% or $200,000 of total loss of autonomy paid in the event that if the client is unable to do 4 out of 6 activities of daily living, feeding, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, or maintaining continence prior to the age of 60, that a total loss of autonomy benefit will be paid out of their contract. A living benefit in your life insurance. We'll see this continues, exact same explanation for our female client, our annual policy fee. Despite the fact that there are 2 clients here, we only charge 1 policy fee. You could put more clients, more coverages into the exact same illustration, and there will still only be 1 policy fee. This is one of the beauties of this concept. We also include the accelerated death benefit, which I will explain quite briefly. It is access to your insurance in the event you are diagnosed with a terminal illness with less than 24 months of life expectancy. We will advance up to 50% of your face amount. I don't expect you to remember all of these details. They are explained in the description, and it's why I recommend a full illustration be done. So here as we continue, the 20-year term is going to explain that it's a term product. A term product with La Capitale is a little bit unique. While it's a level term, a level premium for 20 years, at the end of the 20 years, we renew in 10-year increments. This might sound a little bit unusual, but in most cases, clients want the lowest renewal premium possible. They never expect to renew it. Every client forgets that the premium is going to increase at the end of the initial term period. And by having a 10-year renewal rather than a 20-year renewal, that renewal premium gets to stay quite a bit lower for the client. What will typically happen at the end of the renewal is the client will either re-enter the market by redoing medicals if they're still healthy, at which point a lower premium is very attractive because it means they're paying a smaller premium while they're redoing underwriting. If they're not eligible for market re-entry due to a health change, they may look at conversion. Having the rate going up again in 10 years makes conversion a more viable discussion today because the renewal will happen again sooner. Should your client wish to just retain the product, a lower premium is more attractive and causes less cancellation. And finally, if your client is just going to cancel it because of the increase in premium, the lower premium might mean they don't do that quite as quickly, giving them a benefit for a longer duration. Here's the explanation. Whoops, we moved through the whole screen. Here's the explanation of the total loss of autonomy benefit. As I explained, prior to the 60th birthday, you can get a maximum of $200,000. Following the insured's death, we will reduce your face amount for it. So it's an advance of your face amount. Okay? In order to qualify, you have to be unable to do, as in 75% of the time without the assistance of another person, 4 activities of living, which as stated are feeding, bathing, dressing, transferring, toileting, and maintaining continence. So it's all in there for you to see in the illustration. The accelerated death benefit is also fully explained. If you have You have to have the policy in force for 2 years when it happens. Your life expectancy is 2 years or shorter. The accelerated death benefit is a maximum of 50% of the face amount. As of the payment date, there is interest applied on that accelerated death benefit. It's a loan, but it's a loan against your face amount at a time when life expectancy is very short. So eligibility for other loans is probably unlikely. Following death, it must be repaid. And one other nice component that somehow I missed in going through this is the life expectancy is not 2 years, or the client has received a vital organ transplant. The vital organ transplant is somewhat unique with Le Capitale. If you experience an organ transplant, we will advance up to 50% of your insurance. While the hope with an organ transplant is that everything will go perfectly well going forward and you will be back to your former life, it's not always quite that successful quite that quickly. And if that's the case, you absolutely may need some assistance. If you require assistance, you have access to money here at a time when you might not be eligible to obtain a loan, because if I've just experienced an organ transplant, I'm probably not working, or at least not working to my full capacity. Accessibility, additional benefits, automatically included, features and benefits built into a competitively priced with phenomenal compensation product. This is the story of Le Capitale. Continuing through the software, here's our renewal rates. We've got the initial premium, $545 at issue for our 44-year-old male for his term insurance. At the end of 20 years, it goes up to $5,260. This is when most clients say, I don't know if I can afford this premium. And that's with a 10-year renewal. Notice the renewal after 10 years is at $16,000. Had we made this a 20-year renewal, that $5,000 would have been substantially more. We want to try and keep it as low as possible. Okay? It automatically renews to age 85. We have client 1. Now we have Mrs. Client, our second client. Please notice the rate class is listed as preferred. At Le Capitale, preferred means non-smoker, okay? Or marijuana smoker. Again, exactly the same thing. Our initial age 36, our renewal at 56, 66, and 76, and it will continue until age 85. All the benefits automatically included. This page is very simple. Page 6, it's going to show you the underwriting requirements. This sometimes confuses advisors. We offer a telephone interview or medical information. Medical information means fill out the medical questions in the application. If you don't want to fill out the medical questions in the application, you're uncomfortable with the questions, your situation with your client is such that it's not the most comfortable circumstances for people to answer the questions, which sometimes happens. An example that I like to use is the mother as the advisor, the son-in-law as the client, and he doesn't want to disclose past sexually transmitted diseases. I can understand that it might be a little uncomfortable. It's an example I heard a few days ago, and I thought it was a pretty good one, as to why someone may elect to use a telephone interview with a nurse as opposed to answering the questions. No problem at all. Here we go. You can do the telephone interview. The telephone interview can be ordered through. However, my recommendation is always to complete the medical questions, because then it lets you provide the information to your client and prepare your client for potential challenges. All of that information is included, and that's our basic illustration. The very last page is important notes, premium, revision of premium, suicide, things that are generally available in our industry. They're generally understood terms. If we're not comfortable with them, they're right there included in your illustration, so you don't have to worry about it. The safest and easiest way to answer a question as to what does this mean for your clients is let's look on a last page to see exactly how Le Capitale defines the term. I can give you a very general term, but I'd rather give you the company-specific term if we're talking about this company. It makes you look like you're just being thorough rather than trying to look up the answer, which is sometimes what we're actually doing. Okay? That makes for a fairly simple illustration. If we want to complicate it ever so slightly, we can add additional riders. Children's riders, children's CI riders, accidental fracture riders are all fairly simple riders. The children's CI, the children's life rider, both cover all children. They can be phenomenal for initiating a conversation about protection on children. most people don't want to talk about buying insurance on their children because they don't want to think about things going wrong with their children. By simply including the rider, the conversation happens naturally as you're going through the illustration. It's very easy to remove, but it initiates a conversation about covering each child in the household. Accidental fracture is another great one to open that conversation. We're now at 3:30, and I was looking at trying to do a quick half-hour training session on a simple basic illustration on the La Capitale software. I think this is going to be step 1 of our illustration training. We will continue with adding additional riders, features, and benefits in the upcoming session, which is currently scheduled for 2 weeks from today at the same time. I'm going to stop the recording and thank you for your time.